bet you're wondering why we're out here in the middle of the forest in Flagstaff. Well, in order to tell you that story, we need to back up. Talk a little bit about my childhood and how I grew up. But also, my mom. You know, when I was first asked to create a signature snare drum, I was so excited. I think any drummer wants to be able to have a signature snare drum, something that they can put their name on. But it also felt like an opportunity to share my story with all of you.
Growing up in my household, it was surrounded by music, by kids, by playing, laughter, fun, and all of that was attributed to my mom, my dad, my siblings, my nieces, my nephews, just constantly surrounded by fun and love, and this dweeb right here. My siblings and I grew up in Germany. Anywhere you look around the house, you'll see photos or memories of our time in Germany, like this cuckoo clock here, but also like this centerpiece. But what's most important about this centerpiece is just all the reminders that are there. And even today, Grandma and Grandpa's house is the place to be, full of kids, full of family, and full of love. And it's because of this guy right here, my dad. My mom and dad loved each other so much. They were best friends, partners, and did everything together. And they set the example for what we should strive for in our personal relationships. My dad, well, he continues to carry the torch for us today, making sure that we remember how important family is, the love we hold for each other, and the music that we find in our lives.
Howdy. I can't make this video about my signature snare drum, especially considering what it means, without bringing you in and having you on the channel for the first time.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Let's start all the way at the beginning with her love of the Beatles and her love of music. What can you tell us about Mom's love of the Beatles and of music? Because you know better than anybody.
Well, her love for the Beatles started when the Beatles came out in the late 50s, early 60s. She and her sister absolutely loved the Beatles, and specifically Paul McCartney. Like all teen girls and young people back in that day, the Beatles, the Beach Boys, many of those bands were particularly loved by the youth of that era, and Kathy and Lori were no exception. I also believe that the Beatles, and more specifically Paul McCartney, played a special role in their life in growing up. They didn't have an easy childhood. They had dysfunctional parents, and I think the Beatles gave them a safe space, and Paul became their safer space that they could dream about meeting Paul and singing with Paul and being with Paul as kind of a escape from their reality of their day-to-day lives that they had when they were kids. As she grew up, she never lost her love for music, she never lost her love for the Beatles, and she never lost her love for Paul McCartney. When we got together in the early 80s over in Germany, she would always sing Beatles music and rock and roll music, and you know, it was just her way of bringing joy to her life. She did it when she cleaned, she did it with the kids, she did it when she cooked. She even did it when she worked. She would listen to music or hum music or so on and so forth. So music has been a big, big part of her life.
To say my mom was obsessed with the Beatles would be an understatement. We were surrounded by the Beatles. Their music was part of our family. We would have them on at family holidays, at family parties, get-togethers, and if music wasn't an option, well, she was singing it. Their music was the soundtrack of our lives. And through that connected all of us as a family. The Beatles and their music brought our family together in hard times, when we were feeling sad or sick or upset, but then also in all the good times. We were celebrating, coming together as a family, and was a staple of our lives.
I took her to see Paul McCartney. It was his first tour, and it was in Las Vegas, and I flew her out and I met her there. And you're right, it was magical. I think it was in Caesar's Palace. We were staying, I think, in Circus Circus. That also fits Kathy as being somewhat of a child her whole life. But we saw Paul McCartney, and then we walked from Caesar's Palace all the way back to Circus Circus, which was about 4 or 5 miles down the strip at like 1 o'clock in the morning. And to watch all the people and see all the different kinds of people and walk that walk together hand in hand was very special. And the entire time she was singing songs from the concert that we had gone to until we got back to Circus Circus. So to say that the Beatles and Paul McCartney were part of our life is an understatement. It's been her life and part of her life specifically since she was probably 5 or 6 years old. And no, I'm not jealous of Paul McCartney.
When she told you that I was going to start playing drums, what did you think?
Well, anytime a child picks up an instrument, it's great. Violins and drums are, especially when the violinist, struggles with picking up that. And then the drums were great, and it formulated the band and it formulated friendships. But it is loud and stuff. And again, during our time then, I was working in Human, commuting back and forth. I would go down on Sundays and I would come back on Thursdays, and generally Kyle and the boys would be here on the weekends playing drums most of the time. So it was somewhat of a distraction, but it was a good distraction, and it developed into something that is a lifelong passion of yours now and will be forever, and certainly was a passion that Kathy had with you, listening to you play the drums, and she loved all the boys that were in the band with you as well. So, but drums were always, like music to Kathy, was your escape from your day-to-day reality and gave you a safe place to go and just be Kyle.
The drums are my passion. I have been playing them since I was 8 years old, and I don't want to tell you how old I am now. They have brought me connection, community, friendships, family, experiences I will never forget. And they've always been there for me. An outlet, a place for me to express myself, a place for me to feel safe, and a place to be creative. The drums have been there for me through thick and thin, through good and bad, and are a connection point for me to the people I care about most, and of course, to my mom.
So this was my old bedroom. It's now currently a guest room, but as you can see, it is not very large. And I only show that because I actually gave up having a bed in here when I was a kid. There's a picture, I'll flash it up on the screen, of my drum set up against this back window, taking up the entire space in this room. And there was a point where I just straight up didn't have a bed so I could have drums in here. But this was my childhood room. This is where I grew up.
And the drums were right on the other side of the wall of our family room.
But I showed the audience just how close the drums were to our family room. And how many times do you think you can count where you wanted to watch sports, or Jessica wanted to watch a movie, or somebody wanted to do something, and I decided that was the time to play drums?
It was probably too many times, and and I guess that was tolerable. We would make it, work it out. It wasn't just the drums. I mean, you had 4 guys in that room along with you sometimes in this little 10 by 10, 10 by 12 downstairs small bedroom study with full instruments, full amplifiers, full drum sets, playing what you called music in your choice of genre at the time, which was screaming to me. But it was, again, an outlet for you and the guys that hung out there, and better that than some of the other choices that people were making. So again, it was a win. It just took compromises by everybody in the family to be able to allow you to do your thing and for us to do our things. Mom's love for music was certainly a big part of that, but her bigger part of that was her love for you. And she also loved all the boys that came over here like they were her own kids.
Yeah.
I mean, those kids liked spending time with Kathy probably more than they did some of their other friends, and certainly more than they did their own parents.
Yeah.
I mean, Kathy was, in her own way, one of the kids. I mean, she fed them, she took care of them, she gave them drinks, she cheered them on. She was their biggest cheerleader. And as she was with you, and as she was with all our kids. That was her passion. That was her joy in life.
Through my mom's love of the Beatles, the Ludwig family name was in my household from the time I was born. Seeing Mr. Ringo Starr playing on his classic Black Oyster Ludwig kit was a staple image in our home. So when I got a chance to go out and meet with my friend Bill Ludwig, it was a surreal moment for me, talking about his family's legacy and impact on the drums, our industry as a whole, and building our community. It was a true honor of mine to be able to sit down with somebody who indirectly shaped so much of my life and my family's history, and to learn more about his life, his family's history, and his family's legacy. Visiting Lenexa, Kansas, and filming the documentary for WFL3 Drums, I struck up a close relationship with Bill, Olivia, and the whole team. And it was there that we decided to partner on a signature snare drum, a drum that represents the love, music, and legacy of both of our families.
When Bill and Ian and Olivia and the whole Ludwig family reached out to me about doing this drum together, it felt like fate had intervened. The name Ludwig, the Ludwig family, that legacy has been surrounding me and my family my entire life. And so to get a chance to build this snare drum, to create this vision together, was incredible. And let me tell you, the vision is f***ing rad. Now, you may be wondering, why purple and black? Well, mom getting the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. And I'm curious, what was that moment like for you? And then maybe just talk with us a little bit of the journey of taking care of her and making sure she had what she needed, and then kind of watching the progression, up until the end.
Yeah, we noticed early 2015-ish time, right when I was getting ready to retire, maybe a little before I retired, she was having some memory issues, taking notes, having to rename passwords. Nothing that we thought was abnormal, but probably wasn't normal. And she was reluctant to want to go get checked. And once I retired, and then she said she was going to retire, I made her promise that we'd at least go see what was going on and see if it was something hormonal or whatever else. We did get the diagnosis in mid 2015, like June or July of 2015, that she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And it was at a progression level more than what we had thought. And so we were told by the doctor, if you want to do things now and get them done in the next 3 or 4 years, because the road's going to be rough. Not knowing a lot about Alzheimer's, I researched a lot about it, but not like other things where you can find out, you can get info. One Alzheimer's patient's diagnosis and behavior is not like any others. Similar, but not the same. So it's hard to know what you don't know. And the only way you really learn to know is when you go through it, and then you know. The first 3 or 4 years were not easy, but they weren't hard. She could function for the most part. We traveled. We went back to Germany where we met, had a great time spending 10 days there. We would go and see her sister and her brother. We'd go to concerts, we'd go to movies, we'd go out to dinner. We did the most that we could do, making the best of what we were given. The good news was, being best friends, there was no one else I wanted to spend time with more than Kathy. But Kathy, started to change, and our relationship became less like husband and wife and more like husband and caregiver, parent. She started acting more immature, funny, like a kid, but difficult to get my head around in terms of a relationship. As time progressed, so did the disease. Like people always refer to Alzheimer's, it's the longest goodbye. And you try to make the best out of the best moments and learn how to work with not so great moments and they become more and more as the disease progresses. Once we had the pandemic, and I was watching her at home and taking care of her home with assistance from my sister and occasionally a caregiver that we would have come in and just help me out so I could go do things. The COVID pandemic really turned things south. We weren't certain, as was no one was certain of what was going to happen, what you could do, what you shouldn't do, what you can't do. And we were a little concerned about bringing in caregivers that hadn't been screened or had been in other areas about getting COVID. So we finally made the decision that she was unable to walk, was wheelchair bound, could not really communicate, could not really feed herself, definitely could not dress herself, bathe herself, any of those things to put her into a extended care home, long-term care home that specialized in memory care, and also would allow me to visit even during the pandemic period of time. So for the following 18 months or so, I would go there every morning at about 7:30 in the morning and stay with her until about 8 o'clock at night. And she just never rebounded. From that point on, she was pretty non-communicative, never walked again, could not feed herself. People had to feed her, could not bathe, could not dress. Physical things were working, nothing mentally or emotionally was working. Eventually we moved her to a home that was closer to the house once the disease of the COVID subsided to some degree, and that way all family members could see her and meet her and so on. She was there about 12 months to 18 months, I think, until she passed away. Fortunately, she had some kind of a seizure or attack that caused her oxygen levels to decrease, and we were able to help her along with the help of hospice to take her out of her pain and suffering that she had been going through for far too long.
And that, that last week, I've talked about it before. It was a bittersweet experience because all of us were there.
We were.
And we got to spend her last week with her and bringing the Beatles back in, but listening to Beatles music, telling old stories, sleeping on the floor, just being there as a family.
Yeah, it was magical in the fact that when she had her seizure or whatever, many times patients that are getting close to death have this remarkable, very short-term jolt in their brain that brings back some of the function. And she was able to recognize and slightly communicate, but say hi, recognize people's faces, recognize names for about 24 to 48 hours. So when we made the decision, knowing that this was going to be a short-term effect, we were able to have a very magical family moment for those 24 to 48 hours, spending time with her, spending time with each other, until we got to a point where we had to start administering some of the pain medications and some of the other medications that help her move on in her journey.
If you were to say anything to families who are going through what we went through and they're currently in the middle of it, what would you tell them based off your experience?
Take advantage of the moment when the moment's there. So if you get the diagnosis and the person's still fairly functional, keep them functional, keep them active. We kept Kathy working out, we kept Kathy running, we kept Kathy energized, socially involved. I do believe the pandemic, which was hopefully a rarity, impacted as it did not only with Kathy, with all Alzheimer's patients, to include all other patients that were in long-term care facilities during that time. Learn as much as you can learn. Try to get someone that may show symptoms and signs early to go get checked. I know that's sometimes a hard thing to do, but it's much easier to slow it down the earlier diagnosis. And they're constantly, every day, making strides, especially for early diagnosis, just like cancer, just like heart issues, just like liver issues. If you find the disease early, it's sometimes very treatable with minimal treatments. And the longer it waits, the treatments are less effective and more difficult. But spend time with them, make it magical. Don't make it negative. Easier said than done, but I will say that I got closer to Kathy in the first 3 or 4 years after her diagnosis, and the kids and the grandkids. So take advantage of when the good things are there. Take advantage of it.
If you could say anything to her right now that you're comfortable saying on the camera, what would you tell her?
Well, I tell her thank you for spending 38 years with me and giving me 5 wonderful children and 3 dogs and a great life and being my best friend, and that I love her and I miss her. And I couldn't have had a better partner in life. Sorry that it ended the way it did, and looking forward to seeing her when I make that crossover and spending eternity with her. She's one of a kind. And I think this tribute with her, the drum, which is symbolic of her, symbolic of you, symbolic of our family, and hopefully will become symbolic for the fight against Alzheimer's, because we've got to find a cure, and we've got to find a better path for the patients and the families that go through this difficult battle. And hopefully we can make the battle less painful for both the patient and the family members as time goes forward. And hopefully this will just be one more piece that pushes that needle closer and closer to the ultimate cure.